Good morning, everyone. Today is Monday, April 6th, and it's a beautiful sunny day up here where I am in Boston Lake. I hope the weather's the same down where you guys are in Colony. I'm looking forward to starting a new unit with you this week, Unit 5. And I want to start just on our Google Classroom stream to point out a couple of announcements that I posted before making this video. So once you are watching this video, please make sure that you've also looked at these two announcements. There's an announcement here about what I want you to do in order to turn in your Unit 4 packets. If you haven't done so yet, there's 3 different options that you can choose from. So make sure you look over that. And here's also our distance learning schedule, our document that you guys can keep open in a separate tab for this week, for April 6th through April 10th. And this is going to include topics for each day that I want you to cover, and also due dates of any assignments or Google Form questions that I want you guys to complete. And we'll see that together in just a second. So right on top is your Unit 5 packet. This is something that you can type right into that we're going to use for our Middle Ages or Medieval Ages unit. All right, so let's go over to our distance learning schedule. So just like I used last week, I want to give you guys this document so you can keep track of the things that I want you to do and our due dates for the week as well. So up on the top, there's lesson topics, and this will be a very familiar, very repetitive cycle over the next couple weeks when we go through this unit. I tried to make it as repetitive as possible so that you guys fall into some habits and you kind of know what to expect, and you're not always being thrown by different stuff. As we go into this new unit, that will take place easier now that we don't have to worry about studying for a practice test that we did for Unit 4 last week and some separate little enduring issues assignments, although we will do those maybe later at the end of this unit. So this will be a nice kind of repetitive cycle for you this week, and you guys can fall into some good habits. So up on the top here today, we're going to look at the fall of Rome and how it sets up the Middle Ages. And we'll talk a little bit about time period of what the Middle Ages really is and what the word medieval also means. So we're going to be looking at pages 2, 3, and 4 today. And just as you look through the rest of the week, each day I'm only going to assign you a couple of pages. And you'll see in the packets, they're not very long or involved. A lot of them just have a little chunk of reading, a couple of questions, maybe some images or documents to look at. But each day will be pretty minimal. Twice a week, there's going to be a review question set posted on a Google form that I want you guys to check in with me and send that in so that I know what you've accomplished in the pages earlier, and to try some questions and see what you've learned and test yourself out. So back to today, we're going to do pages 2, 3, and 4. And the only assignment that is due today, which is kind of your standing assignment for the week, as you look at the bottom, submitting your Unit 4 packet is something that I announced on Google Stream. I just want to give you some details about when I want you to assign that and how I want you to assign that. And that's kind of your standing assignment for the week. If you've already done that, you're pretty much all set. But I want to give you guys the rest of this week to try to get that into me. Submitting the review questions are twice a week, Wednesday and Friday. All right, so for today, let's go to our packet pages and we'll start our new unit. All right, so here's the cover of our Unit 5, the Middle or Medieval Ages. Just some little images to kind of grab your attention, a couple of which that we used in our See Think Wonders on Friday. There's one of the manner system that we'll learn about more tomorrow. On the bottom here too, I just want to point out, this is where I want you to type in your name, even though this is a digital copy, and when you send it to me, it's attached to your email name. If you were to print this out, or if it ever got mixed up or anything, it's just a nice way to document on the actual page your name and your class period. So please delete this, type in your name, delete that, and type in your class period number. And also on the bottom, just to help you draw your attention to the directions and to certain spots where I want you to answer a question or fill something in, I've highlighted in different colors these two sections of our packet. So as we go through, Everything that is in blue is required. This is either directions or an actual question they want you to pay attention to and complete. That's always going to be highlighted in blue. There are a couple of sections where I wanted to give you some optional tasks, some opportunities to dive into stuff a little bit deeper, to get a little bit of extra info, and those tasks are going to be highlighted in green. A lot of those are just extra video clips that I would have selected from and maybe chose to show if we were in the classroom. And I wanted to give you guys some opportunities to watch those if you want. So those sections are optional, but if you have some extra time, while we're in quarantine, if you have all your other schoolwork done and you're looking for something to do, if any of these topics are pretty interesting to you and you want to get a little bit more, you can do some of those green highlighted extra info tasks. All right, so let's look at our first couple of pages. I'll kind of go through these 2 pages with you together and set you up for the last part of it, the last task, just to get you off on the right foot, and then I'll let you guys finish the rest of the pages on your own. So on page 2, our first actual material page, our question for today is, how did the fall of Rome cause new power arrangements in Europe? How does the fall of Rome set up this time period called the Middle Ages? So a quick note about time periods. I'll read this with you. The Middle Ages are the time period from 476 CE, which is the date that kind of marks the official fall of the Roman Empire, to around 1450 CE in Western Europe. Sometimes the whole post-classical era is referred to as the Middle Ages, but it is referred to the Middle Ages because historians viewed it as a less important time period between Rome and the early modern period. And since Rome and the birth of the early modern period happened in Europe, we will only consider the Middle Ages to be an era specific to Europe. Little asterisk on that one, though, is, however, there are a couple pages I put into this packet where I want to visit how Japan has a very similar economy and social structure that medieval Europe does. So when we talk about feudalism in Europe, a little bit later in the packet, we do compare that style of feudalism to a similar style of feudalism in Japan. But generally, we're going to be talking about Europe. So this time period called the Middle Ages is also considered and referred to as the medieval ages. And this is just a version of an old Latin word that kind of means unimportant or in the middle of, old-fashioned is another way of referring to it. It's just another fancy word to kind of say that we're talking about a time period in the middle of more important events, at least things that were considered in the past to be more important. All right, so on the timeline here, we're looking at about 400 CE, and we look at this event of the fall of Rome in 476 CE as the left bookmark of this time period. So we're going to go from the 400 CE all the way to the 1400s, a lot of centuries that are covered in this Middle Age period. The event that we saw last unit, that is the most recent right-hand bookmark event of this time period, is the fall of Constantinople in 1453. Remember at the end of our Unit 4, after we studied the rise of the Islamic civilizations, their golden age, and then eventually how the Ottomans, which was an Islamic civilization, spread into Europe and actually conquered over the Byzantine Empire's capital of Constantinople. That was in 1453. So all of the time period events with the Islamic civilizations that we learned about last unit in Unit 4, that is all happening at the same time as everything we're going to look at this unit. Those civilizations are existing in the same Middle Age time period, except their civilization was very prosperous, flourishing, having golden ages, trading with a lot of other parts of the world, and experiencing a way of life that was very, very different from what we're going to see here in Europe in the Middle Ages. All right, so our first task is to kind of recall some information that we learned about last unit and to predict what that means in the future going into this unit, into this unit's time period of the Middle Ages. So this part I filled out a little bit for you just to get you off on a good start. The first thing I want you to do is to recall some of the causes of the fall of Rome. The first thing that you can think back to is that they had a lot of issues with keeping out barbarian groups from outside the Roman Empire's territory. Their army was weakened. There was a lot of disloyalty to the Romans. The fact that they were actually hiring some barbarian soldiers that they had conquered over in the past into their ranks to try to get enough soldiers to be stationed all around the empire was a problem, because those barbarians that they're hiring, they're just in it for the money. They're not necessarily loyal to the Roman society or to the Roman generals that are their bosses. The economy also suffered. This is a reason for our second reason. Barbarians are pirating the seas and the land trade routes, and people cannot, trade and secure their items and their money when it's on these trade routes, because these barbarians are stealing, robbing, and pirating the ships. Our third reason is that there was a lot of political instability. Emperors of Rome many of them were being assassinated for only a couple of years after they got into power, and this was often by their own fellow Romans, sometimes even their own bodyguards, the Praetorian Guards, to try to sell off that position to a richer person who wanted to be emperor. So there's a lot of political instability. So all of that glory and grandeur and stability that the Roman Empire did bring, when the Roman Empire falls, this creates a section of that empire, the western part, that really kind of falls into a lot of chaos. And the eastern part, we'll see, eventually becomes the Byzantine Empire. So this section here I'm going to leave for you guys to try on your own. Just think about some of the long-term effects of a civilization like the Romans that had a lot of achievements, a lot of prosperity. Once that is gone, how would you think all that stability, all those people living under that type of society would be affected? What kinds of things would happen in their lives? What kind of things might happen to the environment or the geography of the area now that all of that is gone? So on page 3, this is going to introduce our first task that I want you to complete. So this gives us a nice visual of what just happened in the fall of Rome that we were recalling back to on the prior page. When the Roman Empire splits into two to try to stay alive and to try to deal with all these problems a little bit easier, the western half eventually becomes the Middle Ages of Europe, the medieval section of Europe. The eastern half, as we know from last unit, becomes a very prosperous empire that lasts another 1,000 years, called the Byzantine Empire. This is actually where Constantinople was located, right here on this little isthmus. This is like modern day Greece, and this is where the Islamic civilizations are thriving at the same time over here in the Middle East. So your question for this page and the next page is, on which side of the Roman Empire would you have chosen to live on, Western or Eastern? We know a little bit about the Eastern Empire. We don't know too much about the Western Empire yet. So below are some images. I want you to analyze the images below and read the text on the next page, and then respond in the box that follows to decide which side of the empire you would have wanted to ended up on and lived on. So the two images here, this gives you a little example of a manor system, the common type of community that would be in medieval Europe that somebody would be living in. This is the document that we have seen before on our test and in our Unit 4 document practice. This is showing the wealth from all the different trade coming from all different directions that is going into the Byzantine Empire's capital city of Constantinople. So that gives you a little refresher on a lot of the prosperity, the wealth, the learning and business action that was happening in the Byzantine Empire. So as you scroll down on page 4, I want you to take a little read through these bullet points that describes and explains a little bit more about what life was like in the western part of the Roman Empire, which eventually becomes medieval Europe. and some reminders about what was happening in the Byzantine Empire. This will be a refresher from what we learned about them last unit. So as you compare those bullet points and you look over the descriptions from the images, you now have to fill out this box here. So it's time to decide and explain your choice. Decide on which side of the Roman Empire would you have chosen to live on, Western or Eastern. And make sure you're using at least one, maybe even more, pieces of evidence from these bullet points, from the text and the images above to back up your decision. Once you have done that, this is an example of an optional extra info task. This will give you a nice summary introduction to some of what we will learn this unit. There's 2 video clips. The first one is about a 12-minute crash course clip on the Dark Ages, which is another word for these medieval ages. A lot of people considered them to be dark in Europe because there was a lot of suffering. Life had kind of taken a backwards turn from the prosperity of Rome. A lot of these civilizations and communities in Northern Europe were behind in technology compared to what the Romans had, and especially behind compared to the Islamic civilizations in the Middle East. The second clip here is just a little animated kind of whiteboard drawing kind of timeline, which gives you a little introduction into a lot of the cause and effects and the sequence of events as we go through this time period of the Middle Ages. It's about 3.5 minutes long. So if you would like to get a little quick synopsis, this is optional. You don't have to do it if you don't have time, but if you do, it'll be a nice way to visualize some of the things that we're going to learn about. And I've given you a box here to just type in any notes, anything you guys want to document in our packet. So that is the page that I want you guys to work on today. When you look at your distance learning schedule document, you'll see that page 5, the feudal system, is where I want you to start tomorrow. Okay, so here is your packet and your distance learning schedule and some reminders about how I want you to turn in the Unit 4 packet from last week. So guys, email me if you have any questions. I hope that gives you a nice layout of how things are going to work this week and next week in our new packet. Don't hesitate to send me any questions, and make sure that you guys are looking back to our stuff last week if you're still catching up on any old assignments. All right, I hope you guys have a great day. It's nice and sunny outside. If you get all your work done, you can get outside, take a little walk with the dog or something, enjoy some sun. And I want you guys to stay healthy and stay positive, and have a great week. Bye-bye.